Hello, I'm Oscar Young here at Stanley Gibbons in the Strand in London, and I'm one of the specialists in the auction department. Colour identification in philately is a conundrum in itself. The spectrum of colours that exist, this rainbow of philately colours, is quite spectacular. Some stamps are absolutely beautiful in their appearance and colours, but colour identification is another matter. There are some colours which appear to be exactly the same with minute differences, different names, interesting names, ranging from aniline to pale towards deep. And of course, you have to take into consideration the errors of colour. And I'm going to talk to you about a stamp which is not like the other, and hopefully you'll understand by the end of the video the difference between the two. In 1935, King George V celebrated his Silver Jubilee. Now, anyone knows King George V, he is the present Queen's grandfather and was also a very accomplished stamp collector. In fact, the majority of the royal collection, which is looked after by Her Majesty the Queen today, was formed by him in the 20s and the 30s. And he, of course, took a great interest in the stamps that were being produced in Great Britain and across the British Empire. And to mark his Silver Jubilee, a set of 4 stamps were issued in Great Britain, looking particularly like this. This is the design that was picked, and it's a very sort of modernist yet classical design. Now, this is the Tuppenny Halfpenny. This was the top value of the set that was done, and it's probably the one most attractive in my opinion. I do like blue stamps. But the thing is, this is blue. Most people understand that that is blue, but it has a colour changeling friend. And if anyone knows the story already, will probably know what I'm going to talk to you about. In 1935, when these were printed, 4 sheets were printed in a different kind of blue, Prussian blue, instead of the normal ultramarine. And this different kind of blue looks like this. Now, it's still blue, of course it's still blue, but if you can see, there's a very subtle difference. Now, this is the Prussian blue era of colour, probably one of the most famous era of colours in Great Britain philately. And some of the sheets got out and were put up for sale in a London post office, and they were sold, and 3 sheets had been sold and broken up for postage. And these era of colour Prussian blue stamps come from those sheets that were sold at that little London post office. Now, these stamps have attained absolute fame beyond all parallels, being famous era of colours. They are highly prized and desired by collectors, but of course this question of colour identification also comes in. How can you tell the difference between the rarity, which is worth £12,000, versus the common example here, which is worth a mere £2 to £5? And hopefully this will tell you. What I've got here is something which I think every collector should own, and that is one of these, a colour guide. This is a much older example. There are more newer ones that have been produced by Stanley Gibbons over the years. Colour guides, colour charts, colour keys, or perhaps even the Stanley Gibbons colour wheel. But this is the colour guide that was produced in the 1920s, some 10 years before this stamp was printed, but it's a very good tool. Now, if you open it up, there are actually individual stamps that were printed in the colours or generalizations of the colours that were used by the stamp printers of the day, and it is an absolute invaluable piece of kit for the collector in identifying colours. And of course, we are going to use this to be able to identify the Prussian blue against the ultramarine and show you the difference using actual colour standards, using the real pigments, using the real inks that we use to print stamps. So first of all, let's look at where the common ultramarine blue stamp fits on our little colour chart here. And of course, the blues are in the 4th row here. And it's a huge spectrum ranging from sort of brown lake all the way to slate grey. So it's from red to black in that sense. And we start off with the violets, and you can see it's not there, but it is close, because ultramarine, the ink that was used, is a sort of violety blue. And you come across here, it's not slate blue, you can see that, it's definitely not deep ultramarine. It's not pale ultramarine, but it is definitely ultramarine, and it fits quite neatly within those 3, that little shade band right there. So that is definitely ultramarine. Now if we bring out the Prussian blue, now Prussian blue is a different pigment altogether. It's a very greeny sort of blue, and it reacts slightly different. So if we look at where the ultramarine is on this shade band of these wonderful colors, it does not match slate blue, doesn't match deep ultramarine, doesn't match pale, doesn't even match bright. But we move towards green, and of course being a greeny blue, it's not turquoise. It's definitely not azure or light blue or even blue, but it fits very comfortably just here with Prussian blue itself, the color. And there it is, sitting proudly, very much in the shade band. And of course, when you have the two stamps together, you can see the difference in color quite clearly. But of course, there are many collectors and people who have since, perhaps inherited collections or seen this stamp online who quite often mistake the rarer one for the much more common one. So having a color guide such as this, or some understanding of how colors are on the color wheel, if everyone's familiar with that, does go a great deal to assisting collectors in their collecting. And of course, it doesn't just apply to blue problems that you have identifying, it applies to reds. When you intertwine with such terminology as aniline and all the various different adjectives that we use to describe the colors of stamps. And so again, a color chart such as this, or an old color wheel, or one of our old color keys are absolutely invaluable pieces of kit. And this is something that I use almost every day in my career as a professional philatelist. So I hope that has given you some ideas about what color can do to value, and more importantly, what you can do as a collector, or perhaps a new collector, or perhaps even an old collector, in thinking about color differently and seeing how having control standards and perhaps a color guide like this can be an absolutely invaluable tool for your collecting. And as always, please like and subscribe for more Stanley Gibbons content.